Dust exploded in a violent burst just inches from her cheek as the sniper round punched into the wall, sending chips of ancient plaster raining down on her. Private First Class Maya Reyes hit the ground hard, sliding across the cracked tile floor as another shot shattered the window above her head. She bit back a curse, pressed flat to the floor, and felt the heartbeat in her throat hammering like a jackhammer. Outside, the sun baked the ruins of the city into a blinding, heat-shimmering mirage, and through the cracks in the rubble she could see the outlines of her squad scattered across the street, pinned down and not moving. "Reyes, talk to me." Sergeant Dalton's voice barked through her headset, half static, half fury. "I'm good, I'm inside, second floor," she whispered back, clutching her rifle. Her hands were trembling and she hated it. She forced her breathing to slow, counting down from 5 like she'd been taught. "Sniper's still got eyes on us," Dalton said. "We can't move until you find him." She swallowed hard. That was the thing, her. They all laughed about it behind her back. The child sniper. Barely 19, small, too quiet, the one who painted leaves on her helmet and stitched scraps of burlap into her fatigues like some kid playing soldier in the woods. But now they needed her. She slid on her belly to the corner, peeking through a jagged hole in the plaster. The street below was a skeletal canyon of burned-out cars and collapsed balconies. Somewhere, a single enemy sniper was holding an entire American fire team hostage. Her squad mates were crouched behind wreckage, sweating under the relentless sun, unable to move without getting picked off. She closed one eye, scanning for the telltale shimmer of a scope, the glint of sun on glass. Nothing. Just the hiss of heat. Then, movement. The tiniest flicker, like a crow tilting its head on a rooftop 3 blocks down. She froze. No glint, no flash. He was smart. Camouflaged into the shattered facade. It would be an impossible shot for most of them. Her finger tightened on the trigger, then relaxed. She backed away from the window and crawled deeper into the ruins. "Reyes? You got eyes?" Dalton demanded. "Not yet. Give me 3 minutes," she murmured. 3 minutes and he might kill one of us. Then tell them not to move." She slung her rifle across her back and began climbing, slow, deliberate, through the building's collapsed stairwell. Her camouflage caught on rebar, threads tearing, but she kept moving. Every sound felt like a scream in the silence. Her squad thought her obsession with camouflage was childish, ridiculous even. But out here it made her invisible. She reached the rooftop and went prone, becoming part of the broken concrete, every movement measured in millimeters. There, again. The crow-like tilt of a helmet. Her heart slowed. Her breathing steadied. She adjusted for distance, crosswind, heat distortion. 1 breath. 2. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her shoulder. The distant figure jerked, slumped, and vanished from view. "Target down," she said calmly into her mic. For a moment there was only silence. Then Dalton's voice, wary, disbelieving. "You sure? Check your sector." Across the street her squad began moving. No more gunfire. No more bullets chewing stone. Reyes exhaled and let her forehead rest against the warm concrete. She could almost feel their relief, but she knew none of them would say it. When they regrouped on the street minutes later, Sergeant Dalton eyed her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Not bad, kid." She said nothing, just adjusted the scraps of burlap hanging from her sleeves. The squad started moving again, weaving through the gutted city, boots crunching on glass. Corporal Briggs, always the loud one, fell in beside her. "You scare the crap out of me, you know that?" "Good," she said. He laughed, shaking his head. "You don't even blink. It's not normal." She didn't answer. She was scanning rooftops, alleys, every shattered window. The city was a graveyard of rust and silence was never safe. They were deep behind the front line, pushing through what had once been a commercial district. Their mission was to secure a safe corridor for supply convoys. The locals had either fled or died long ago. Buildings leaned like broken teeth. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thundered. They stopped in the shell of an old bakery. The smell of burned sugar still lingered faintly under the stench of dust and cordite. Dalton gathered them around, spreading a crumpled map on the counter. "Next objective's the communications hub 2 clicks east," he said. "Intel says enemy forces are using it to coordinate mortar strikes. We take it out, we save a lot of lives. And probably draw every gunman within 5 miles, Briggs muttered. "Probably," Dalton said. "We move at dusk. Rest, rearm, hydrate. Reyes, you're on watch." She nodded and climbed to the bakery's 2nd floor, settling near a shattered window. The street outside was deserted. But her mind wasn't. It was racing. She replayed the shot from earlier, the tiny flicker of movement, the way the enemy sniper had crumpled. She felt nothing. That scared her more than the sniper had. Below her, the squad dozed in shifts, cracking jokes quietly to keep the edge off. They were older, louder, heavier. She joined the army straight out of high school, lying about her age on the application. Not by much, just enough to slip through. She'd grown up hunting squirrels in the woods behind her grandmother's house, learning how to move without making a sound, how to wait for hours without twitching. It had seemed like a game back then. It wasn't a game now. As night fell, they slipped back onto the streets, ghosts in camouflage. The moon painted everything in cold silver. Reyes took point, her eyes adjusting fast. Every shadow could hide death. They reached the outskirts of the comm hub just past midnight. The building was an old radio station, its broadcast tower snapped in half like a broken spear. Dim lights glowed in the windows. Dalton motioned them into cover behind a collapsed wall. Rules of engagement are tight. If we can disable equipment without civilian casualties, we do it. Reyes scanned the perimeter. 2 sentries out front. One smoking, one half asleep. Amateurs. But amateurs still kill you if you get sloppy. I can drop them both, she whispered. Dalton hesitated, then nodded. Do it quiet. She crawled forward through the rubble, moving so slow it felt like hours. She blended into the debris, just another pile of broken stone. When she was within 40 yards, she steadied her rifle. One suppressed shot. The smoker dropped, crumpling like cloth. Before the second sentry could react, another shot punched through his throat. He folded silently. Clear, she whispered. The squad advanced, slipping through the doorway. Inside was chaos frozen in time, papers scattered, monitors flickering with static, half-eaten food on desks. Briggs, plant charges, Dalton ordered. Reyes, cover the stairs. She took position, aiming down the hallway. Her ears caught every creak of floorboards. Then came the sound she dreaded, the soft click of a safety being switched off behind her. She spun. A figure stepped out of the shadows, rifle raised, eyes wide. Too close. She dropped her rifle, lunged, and drove her knife under his ribs. Hot breath burst from his lungs in a gasp. They crashed to the floor together. She clamped a hand over his mouth, feeling his heart hammer against her wrist. He struggled for seconds, then went still. Her own breath came in sharp bursts. She wiped her blade on her sleeve, picked up her rifle, and got back on guard. Charge is set, Briggs called. Everyone out, Dalton ordered. They ghosted back into the night. Moments later, the radio station blew apart in a rolling roar of fire and shrapnel. The shockwave rattled windows 2 blocks away. Good work, Dalton said as they regrouped. Command'll be happy. Briggs hooped quietly, adrenaline high. Hell of a light show. Reyes just checked her rifle. The burlap on her sleeve was blackened from soot. They moved fast, weaving back toward friendly lines. But halfway there, the world erupted. A mortar shell slammed into the street 10 feet ahead, a flash of white light and concussive force that threw them like rag dolls. Reyes hit the ground hard, ears ringing, lungs burning. Screams pierced the smoke. She crawled, coughing, blinking through the haze. Briggs was down, blood pooling under his leg. Dalton was shouting orders, dragging someone by their vest. Incoming whistled again. Move. Into the building. Dalton roared. They scrambled into the nearest structure, a gutted office tower. Dust choked the air. Another shell tore open the street behind them. Reyes grabbed Briggs under the arms and hauled him behind a chunk of collapsed concrete. Blood soaked her sleeves. Stay with me, she hissed. Hurts like hell, he grunted, trying to grin. Tell me I still got the leg. Mostly. Mostly? Shut up and hold still. Dalton slid in beside them, face streaked with soot. We're cut off. Mortars zeroed our exfil route. We're stuck until dawn. Reyes tightened a tourniquet on Briggs's thigh until he screamed. He'll bleed out if we don't evac soon. Dalton's jaw clenched. We can't move. Not through that kill zone. Reyes met his eyes. Then we stopped the mortars. Dalton stared at her, then slowly nodded. You think you can find them? I know I can. He hesitated, then gripped her shoulder. Do it. Don't get killed. She slipped out the back of the building into the ruins. The night swallowed her whole. She moved like a shadow, every sense sharp. The mortars had to be close, maybe 4 blocks. She followed the faint orange arcs of tracer fire, the echoes of shouted orders. After 20 minutes she found them, an enemy mortar crew set up in a cratered parking lot, shells stacked beside them like grotesque eggs. 4 men half asleep between salvos. She lay prone on a collapsed wall, adjusting her scope. 4 shots. That was all she'd get before they scattered. She exhaled, slow and steady. 4 squeezes. 4 men down. The mortars fell silent. She stayed still for a full minute, watching, waiting. Nothing moved. Then she crawled forward, rigged the mortar tubes with grenades and slipped away. Minutes later, explosions rolled through the night as the mortars blew apart. She returned to her squad just before dawn, boots silent on the rubble. Briggs was pale but alive. Dalton gave her a long look, part pride, part unease. "You're a damn ghost," he said softly. She just nodded and sank down against the wall, exhaustion hitting her like a truck. Outside, the sun rose blood red over the ruined city. And for the first time, none of them laughed at her camouflage. The morning sun turned the dust in the air to molten gold as they trudged through the shattered streets, silent and hollow-eyed. Private First Class Maya Reyes walked at the rear of the column, boots crunching over broken glass, rifle cradled low but ready. They were withdrawing toward the forward operating base, bruised, scorched but alive. Behind them, the gutted radio station still sent a thin black thread of smoke curling into the sky like a reminder. Briggs limped between Dalton and another soldier, his thigh wrapped in layers of bloody bandages. He cracked jokes to hide the pain, but his face was gray under the grime. Reyes said nothing. She just scanned as always. Every rooftop, every shadow. They were halfway back when Dalton raised a fist, signaling halt. Everyone froze, crouching low. "Drones?" he murmured, tapping his headset. "Command says enemy recon birds are in the area." "Of course they are," Briggs muttered. Reyes tilted her head, listening. Faint at first, then clearer, the high insect whine of rotors slicing the air. She slid into the shadows of a burnt-out sedan, melting into it as if she'd been carved there. A small quadcopter swept overhead, its camera lens glittering like a cold eye. The squad held still. Even their breathing seemed too loud. The drone buzzed past. Dalton hissed, "Move. Now." They darted through side alleys, weaving a zigzag pattern to throw off any observers. But Reyes knew if one drone had seen them, more would follow. This wasn't over. By the time they stumbled into the forward operating base, an ugly rectangle of concrete blast walls, razor wire, and sun-bleached sandbags, they were drained. The gate guards waved them through. Inside, soldiers lounged on ammo crates, drinking burnt coffee and smoking, pretending they weren't waiting to die. Dalton checked Briggs into the field hospital. Reyes followed, leaning against the wall outside the curtain as medics cut away his soaked bandages. He gave her a thumbs up, trying to look brave. "You saved my ass," he said hoarsely. "Don't make me do it again," she replied. He chuckled, then winced. Dalton found her later at the makeshift rifle range, cleaning her weapon with slow, precise motions. He crouched beside her. "Command wants us back out tonight." She didn't stop cleaning. "Already?" "Intel says enemy forces are massing south of here. If they push through, they'll hit the supply convoys. We're going to disrupt them. Small unit raid. Fast and loud. Briggs can't go." "I know. He's out." "You're not." She snapped the bolt back into place, clicked the rifle closed. "When do we leave?" "Dusk." That night, under a bleeding sunset, they rolled out in 2 armored transports. Reyes sat wedged between packs of ammunition, helmet low over her eyes, the motion of the vehicle rocking her like an angry cradle. The squad was quieter without Briggs's running mouth. Too quiet. Dalton briefed them on the move. Recon spotted enemy logistics hub in a factory complex. "Ammo, fuel, maybe armor. We hit them fast, plant charges, get out before they regroup. No lingering." "Sounds like a death wish," muttered a specialist named Kent. "It's Tuesday," Dalton said. The others snorted softly, the fragile humor of soldiers about to gamble their lives again. They dismounted a mile from the objective, slipping through the industrial wasteland on foot. Rusted cranes clawed at the twilight. Rats skittered across cracked pavement. Reyes led point. She was silent as smoke, scanning ahead with her night optics. The complex rose before them, a squat fortress of corrugated metal and concrete, surrounded by stacks of shipping containers. Dim lights glowed. Shadows moved, patrols. Dalton crouched them behind a collapsed truck. Reyes' eyes on defenses. She slithered forward, barely disturbing the gravel, and settled into a nest of rubble. Through her scope she counted 5 guards, 2 machine gun nests, a pair of parked technicals with mounted guns. No snipers visible, but that didn't mean there weren't any. She whispered into her mic, 5 outside, light patrol, guns north corner. No overwatch. "Copy," Dalton replied. We breach on your shot. She slowed her breathing, steadied. One squeeze, one guard fell silently. Go, Dalton said. The squad surged from cover, moving like ghosts. Suppressed rifles coughed. 2 more guards crumpled. The last 2 shouted, fumbling for radios, but Reyes dropped them before the sound carried. They slipped into the complex. Inside was a maze of fuel drums, crates, and forklifts, the air thick with the reek of oil. Charges on fuel stores, Dalton ordered. Can't watch R6. Reyes overwatched from above. She climbed a stack of shipping containers, vanishing into shadow. From above she saw the whole layout, 2 main warehouses, a motor pool, tents with faint lamplight. Too much activity for just supplies. Then she saw it, a row of armored vehicles under camo netting. Not just trucks. Tanks. She whispered, Dalton, we've got armor here. Real armor. How many? 6. Maybe more. Pause. We don't have enough explosives for that. Then we improvise. Before Dalton could reply, shouting erupted outside. A patrol returning early. Floodlights flared to life, bathing the yard in harsh white. Contact. Kent yelled. Gunfire exploded like thunder in a canyon. Reyes fired fast, dropping the lead patrolman. Bullets shrieked off the containers. Sparks danced. Plant and move. Dalton bellowed. The squad scattered, ducking behind cover as they rigged charges to fuel drums and trucks. Reyes covered them, rifle snapping. Each shot found a target, but they just kept coming. One enemy made it onto her container stack, screaming in his language. She swung her rifle like a club, smashed his jaw, then drove her boot into his chest, sending him crashing to the ground below. Charges set, someone yelled. Fall back. Dalton roared. They sprinted for the perimeter as bullets stitched the air around them. Reyes dropped to one knee, fired her last 3 rounds into the base of a fuel tower, then ran like hell. Dalton hit the detonator. The night tore open. A wall of fire ripped through the complex, mushrooming into the sky. Fuel tanks erupted like volcanoes. Shrapnel rained down. The shockwave flung them into the dirt. Reyes rolled, ears ringing. Heat washed over her in waves. She forced herself up, blinking through the glare. Everyone up. Move. Dalton screamed. They staggered into the darkness, coughing, bruised but alive. Behind them, the entire logistics hub was a burning skeleton. They ran until their lungs felt like broken glass, until the fires were just a distant glow. Then they collapsed in a drainage ditch, gasping. Dalton looked at Reyes, his face smeared black. That was a damn circus. She wiped soot from her eyes. It worked. Yeah, he admitted and gave her the smallest grin. They limped back to the FOB at dawn, where exhausted mechanics were already patching bullet holes in vehicles and cooks stirred gray coffee. Word of their raid spread fast. Soldiers slapped them on the back, wide-eyed. Reyes said nothing, slipping away to clean her rifle. Her hands shook when no one was looking. That afternoon, command called Dalton to the operations tent. Reyes lingered nearby, pretending to inventory ammo just outside. She caught fragments of conversation. Enemy counterattack. Massing armor units, 48 hours. Need eyes on their staging area, before they hit our line. Dalton emerged grim-faced. He saw her side. We're going back out. Where? Deep. Real deep. You, me, 3 others. Recon only. No heroics. We find where they're building their spearhead, get out, call in airstrikes. Recon never stays recon, she said quietly. He didn't deny it. They left that night under a moon like a shard of bone. This time they moved light. No heavy packs, just rifles, optics, rations, water, and radios. Silence wrapped around them like a shroud as they crossed into enemy territory. Miles from any friendly forces, they found the enemy staging ground just before dawn. Reyes lay belly flat on a ridge, peering through her scope at the valley below. What she saw made her blood run cold. Dozens of armored vehicles lined up under camo nets. Rows of artillery. Hundreds of troops drilling in formation. A war machine grinding to life. Dalton crawled up beside her, eyes narrowing. That's a whole damn brigade. They'll steamroll our line, she said. Not if air power gets here first. He keyed his radio, whispering coordinates. Static hissed back. He tried again. Nothing. Signals jammed, Reyes murmured. Figures. Then we break the jammers. He looked at her. You saw them? 3 trucks with dish arrays, east side of the camp. He stared at the valley, calculating. Too many guards. We can't fight our way in. We don't fight. We sneak. He gave a slow grin, the grin of a man already resigned to madness. Fine. Ghost time. They circled wide, slipping through thorny scrub. The eastern edge of the camp was a tangle of power cables, antennas, and generators, guarded by board sentries smoking in the dark. Reyes crawled forward alone, wearing her full camouflage rig, scraps of burlap, mud streaks, bits of local vegetation. She became part of the earth itself. She reached the first jammer truck, planted a block of C4 under its axle, then ghosted to the next. Each move was a heartbeat stretched to eternity. Her breath sounded like thunder in her own ears. At the third truck, a guard turned suddenly, frowning. She froze, barely 10 feet away. His eyes passed over her, then away. She waited until he looked down to light his cigarette, then slid her knife across his throat. He crumpled silently. She planted the last charge and slipped away like smoke. Dalton was waiting in the scrub, eyes wide. Didn't even see you go. She clicked the detonator. 3 simultaneous blasts tore through the jammers. Antennas toppled. Sparks rained. Alarms screamed across the valley. Dalton keyed his radio again. This time it crackled to life. Fire mission, he hissed. Coordinates inbound, enemy brigade staging area. Multiple armored assets. Immediate priority strike. The reply was immediate and ice-cold. Fire mission confirmed. Time on target, 3 minutes. Clear the area. They ran. Behind them, chaos erupted. Searchlights swept the ridge. Bullets cracked past. They dove behind rocks as the first artillery shells screamed down from the sky. The valley erupted. Firestorms ripped through vehicles and ammo dumps. Secondary explosions turned night into noon. Shockwaves rolled up the ridge, flattening scrub. Reyes lay prone, watching hell consume the enemy force. Part of her felt triumphant. Part of her just felt hollow. Dalton's voice was hoarse in her ear. Mission complete. Let's get the hell home. They crawled, then walked, then staggered through the wasteland as dawn bled across the horizon. By the time they reached friendly lines, they were little more than soot-streaked phantoms. Back at the FOB, soldiers stared like they were seeing ghosts. Dalton clapped Reyes on the shoulder. You saved every soul on that line. She just nodded, eyes distant. That night, alone on the roof of a bunker, she stared out at the dark hills. Her hands were steady now, and that worried her more than when they shook. Somewhere out there, she knew, someone had survived the inferno she'd unleashed. Someone who had seen the small camouflaged ghost that had destroyed their army. And they would be coming for her. The first mortar fell at dawn. Reyes had been halfway through a mug of scorched coffee when the sky ripped apart. The blast tossed her off the ammo crate, slamming her shoulder into the ground. Sandbags burst open around her like gutted animals, flinging grit and canvas. Then came the second shell and the third and the fourth. Incoming, someone screamed. Sirens howled across the forward operating base as soldiers sprinted for cover. The ground shook like an angry god was pounding its fist on the earth. Reyes rolled to her feet, ears ringing, and bolted for the nearest bunker. A sergeant grabbed her vest, yanking her down the stairs a split second before another shell detonated on the parade ground, turning the flagpole into shrapnel. Inside the bunker, dust sifted from the ceiling. Dalton was there, helmet half-strapped, barking orders into his radio. They're bracketing us, adjusting fire. Everyone down, stay down. Reyes crouched against the wall, heart pounding. Her shoulder throbbed from the fall, but she ignored it. Outside, the bombardment intensified, each blast closer, more precise. This wasn't random harassment. This was revenge. Counter batteries spooling up, Dalton said between bursts of static. We'll shut them up. A deafening crack split the air. The bunker's lights flickered, then went dark. Generator hit, someone muttered. Dalton slammed his fist on the table. They're walking it in perfect. Someone's spotting for them. Reyes's mind snapped into sharp clarity. Spotters meant eyes. Eyes meant someone out there watching, guiding death onto them. I can find them, she said. Dalton turned, sweat streaking his soot-caked face. Too dangerous. We ride it out. Ride it out and we're buried. They locked eyes. The base trembled with another near hit. Dust snowed down. Dalton cursed. Fine. Do it. Take Kent and Lopez. Kill those eyes. She was already moving. They slipped out the East Sally gate, hugging the blast wall, then belly crawled into the rubble field beyond. Mortars shrieked overhead, slamming into the base behind them. North Ridge, Reyes whispered, scanning through her scope. High ground, clear line of sight. That's where I'd be. Good enough for me, Kent muttered. They ghosted through shell craters and shattered buildings, moving low and fast. Smoke from burning fuel drums rolled across the ruins, cloaking their advance. Half a mile out, Reyes froze, holding up a fist. Through her scope, she spotted a glint on the ridgeline, a lens catching sunlight. "Target," she breathed. They crept closer, weaving between the twisted skeletons of buildings. The air reeked of ash and cordite. Then a sharp crack and Lopez crumpled. Blood sprayed across the dust. "Sniper," Kent hissed, diving behind a wall. Reyes dragged Lopez into cover, but one glance told her he was gone. The round had taken half his skull. Her breath slowed, heartbeat vanishing into stillness. She peeked, fast, a shimmer of ghillie suit in the rocks above. "Stay here," she murmured to Kent. "Reyes." But she was already gone, slipping into shadow. She circled wide, crawling through rubble like a lizard, inch by inch. The sniper fired again, pinning Kent. Closer. She felt every stone under her belly, every grain of grit grinding against her skin. The world shrank to the slow rhythm of her breath. The sniper shifted, scanning. Reyes rose silently behind him. One clean shot through the base of the skull. He slumped forward without a sound. She keyed her radio. "Spotter down." Kent whooped softly. They scrambled to the top of the ridge, and Reyes seized the sniper's long-range radio. She could hear enemy chatter, tight and clipped, coordinates, corrections, urgency. She tossed it to Kent. "Jamming beacon. Kill it." Kent smashed it with his rifle but until it sparked and died. Then they watched. Within minutes, the mortar fire grew erratic, then stopped. Silence rolled back over the wasteland, heavy as lead. They sprinted back to the FOB. The gates were scarred, walls pitted and scorched, but still standing. Medics were dragging the wounded from smoking craters. Dalton met them at the gate, eyes bloodshot. "Spotter's gone," Reyes said. "I figured." The rain stopped. He looked at Lopez's absence, jaw tight, then nodded once. They buried Lopez at dusk. No speeches, just a helmet on a rifle, boots at the base. Reyes stood at the edge of the shallow grave, face unreadable. Kent muttered, "He deserved better." "He deserved to live," Reyes said softly. That night the base felt hollow. The soldiers were quieter. No jokes, no music from the wrecked tent. Just silence and the wind howling through the blast holes in the walls. Reyes lay awake in her bunk, staring at the cracked ceiling. Every time she blinked she saw Lopez's body jerking when the round hit. At 0300 Dalton woke her. "Command wants a recon in force. They think the enemy's massing for a ground assault. If they breach the perimeter, we're finished." She sat up, already strapping her vest. They went out at first light. Dalton, Reyes, Kent, Briggs on crutches but refusing to be left behind, and two new replacements who looked like they'd been born yesterday. They crossed the ruins toward the hills, the silence almost worse than shellfire. 2 miles out they found it. An entire enemy battalion dug in among the hills, trenches, bunkers, camo-netted gun emplacements. Dozens of infantry squads drilling. Armored vehicles hidden under tarps. Briggs let out a low whistle. "Well, we're screwed." Dalton's face was stone. "We can't fight that. Not head-on." "Airstrike," Kent offered. "Too close to civilian ruins. Command won't greenlight it without confirmation on collateral." Reyes spoke quietly. "Then we confirm." They spent the next hour crawling ridge to ridge, mapping positions, counting vehicles, marking suspected ammo dumps. Reyes moved like a shadow, slipping past patrols so close she could smell their sweat. On one pass she found something worse, a cluster of cages half buried in the dirt. Civilians. Thin, filthy, eyes like broken glass. She backed away, heart hammering. "They've got hostages." Dalton swore under his breath. "That seals it. Command needs to know." As they withdrew, one of the replacements tripped on wire. The mine went off. The blast hurled them into the dirt. When the dust cleared, the replacement was gone, just a black crater and shredded gear. Gunfire erupted from the trenches. "Ambush!" Briggs roared. They dove for cover behind boulders as bullets shredded the air. Reyes snapped into firing stance, picking targets with machine precision. 2 enemy soldiers dropped. A third tried to flank, she nailed him through the eye. "Fall back!" Dalton bellowed. They bounded back by pairs, covering each other in short bursts. Briggs hobbled but stayed upright, firing his carbine one-handed. An enemy machine gun opened up from a bunker, pinning them. The ground spat dust inches from Reyes's face. She flung a smoke grenade, rolled into the haze, crawled forward through the choking white. She could see the gun's muzzle flash like a strobe. She hurled a frag. The bunker vanished in a roar of fire and dust. "Go!" she shouted, voice raw. They broke contact, sprinting through gullies and over shattered ridges until the gunfire faded behind them. By the time they stumbled back into the FOB, they were bloody, limping, half-deaf from blasts, but alive. Dalton slammed the recon data onto the command table. Enemy battalion, heavy entrenchments, hostages on sight. They're coming in soon. The colonel just nodded grimly. We'll hold them. But Reyes saw the fear behind his eyes. That night, the base turned into an anthill on fire. Engineers laid new mines. Gunners zeroed their mortars. Medics stocked morphine like it was gold. Reyes sat on the bunker roof cleaning her rifle. Her hands moved automatically. Her mind was elsewhere, on the cages. On the eyes staring out of the dirt. Dalton climbed up beside her. You good? She didn't look up. Fine. You're lying. She said nothing. He watched the distant hills, dark shapes against a bruised horizon. They'll hit us soon. Maybe tonight. She finally looked at him. Then we make them pay. He nodded once. At 0300 the attack came. It started with mortars again, heavier than before, pounding the outer walls. Sirens screamed. Searchlights snapped on. Then the screaming began. Enemy infantry surged from the darkness like a black tide, hundreds of them, screaming war cries, tracers stitching the night. Contact front, a gunner roared. The base erupted. .50 cal machine guns hammered, cutting swaths through the charging wave. Mortars thumped from inside the wire, explosions turning men to mist. Reyes was already on the wall, rifle barking. She dropped target after target, calm and mechanical, like she was back on the range. Briggs manned a grenade launcher from a wheelchair, laughing like a madman as he turned the earth outside the wire into fountains of dirt and fire. Dalton sprinted along the rampart, shouting orders, rallying squads. But they just kept coming. An RPG slammed into the north wall, tearing a hole. Enemy troops poured through the breach. North wall compromised, someone screamed. Rez didn't think. She vaulted off the wall into the chaos. She hit the ground rolling, came up firing. 3 enemies dropped. She kicked a 4th in the knee, shattered it, slit his throat. Dalton and Kent crashed into the melee beside her. The breach became a maelstrom of screaming, muzzle flashes, and blood. Then a tank rumbled out of the darkness. Its gun swiveled toward the breach. Now, Dalton bellowed. Reyes sprinted through the carnage, grabbed an abandoned rocket launcher, dropped to one knee. The tank's gun flashed. The shell shrieked past overhead, annihilating a guard tower. Reyes fired. The rocket slammed into the tank's treads, blowing it sideways in a geyser of flame. A cheer rose from the wall. The enemy wavered. Then the base mortars found their range, raining death. Within minutes the enemy broke, scattering into the night. Silence crashed down like a falling building. The yard was a butcher's floor. Bodies everywhere. Smoke curling from craters. Reyes stood trembling, rifle slack in her hands, ears ringing. Dalton limped over, blood running from a gash on his forehead. We held. She nodded numbly. But she knew it wasn't over. Somewhere out there, beyond the hills, whoever commanded this enemy force had just watched their night assault fail. And they would come back harder. The night air over Pactica province was thin, brittle, and cold as glass. Sergeant Daniel Ruiz crouched low behind a slab of fractured concrete, scanning the village below through his night vision goggles. Green ghosts shimmered in the shadows, walls, shattered roofs, the faint outlines of abandoned market stalls. A soft wind stirred up grit across the ruined road. He could hear the hum of tension in the silence, that peculiar stillness that always came before violence cracked the air wide open. Beside him, Corporal Jenna Hale lay prone with her custom camouflaged rifle cradled like something sacred. Her paint-splattered ghillie suit made her look like part of the rubble, broken earth come alive. No one had laughed at her camouflage since Cunard province. Not after they'd seen her drop 4 insurgents through smoke and chaos, each shot like punctuation on a sentence no one wanted to read. Movement. Ruiz whispered. Negative. Just shadows playing games, Jenna replied, her voice level. She kept her crosshairs trained on the broken minaret at the center of the village. The mission was straightforward on paper. Covert insertion, locate and extract Staff Sergeant Miller, who had gone missing during an intel sweep 2 days prior. But everyone in Fireteam Raven knew that nothing here stayed straightforward. The enemy controlled the high ground, the valleys, even the whispers of the wind. From the ridge, Lieutenant Graves spoke softly over comms. Team Alpha, mark your entry. Bravo, cut their eastern escape. Jenna, Overwatch is yours. Do not miss. Copy, Jenna said, and Ruiz swore he could almost hear the smile in her tone, razor-thin and cold. They moved like ghosts down the slope. Dirt shifted under boots wrapped in rags to dull their tread. The moon carved sharp shadows across the ruined village, each house an emptied carcass of stone and clay. Ruiz led with his rifle up, finger grazing the trigger, pulse steady. They passed doorways like open mouths, black and silent. Somewhere, a loose sheet of tin rattled in the breeze. Then the first shot came. A crack like splitting wood ripped through the night. Dust plumed near Ruiz's foot. He dropped, rolled, glass slicing into his sleeve. Contact North Tower. Jenna's voice cut in. And before Ruiz could breathe, her rifle thundered once, twice. Two green figures crumpled out of the tower's jagged window. Silence returned, heavier than before. Clear, Jenna said as though she'd simply swatted flies. Ruiz forced himself up, adrenaline making everything too sharp. He glanced toward the tower, two dark shapes sprawled in the rubble like broken dolls. Keep moving, Graves ordered. They advanced into the heart of the village, weaving between collapsed walls. Ruiz's thoughts looped on Miller. They trained together back in Fort Benning, played cards through long desert nights, laughed about nothing until dawn. Now Miller was just missing. And everyone knew what missing meant out here. The team split at the mosque, its dome shattered, prayer mats scattered like leaves. Ruiz and Private Ellis pushed east while Graves and Corporal Diaz swept west. Jenna stayed perched somewhere unseen, her rifle's whisper roaming above them like a phantom's breath. Inside a roofless home, Ruiz found blood dried to a black smear on the cracked floor. Not much, but enough. Graves, he whispered, we've got sign of struggle. East side, third structure from center. Copy. Stay sharp. Ellis was trembling, trying to hide it by keeping his rifle pressed too tight. He was 19, barely past boot camp. Ruiz wanted to tell him it was okay to be scared, that fear meant you were awake. But the words stayed locked behind his teeth. Out here, softness could kill faster than bullets. They moved on. A clatter erupted behind them, Ellis spun, firing wild. Stone exploded from the wall. Cease. Ruiz barked. A goat bounded away, bleeding in panic. Ellis lowered his rifle, shaking harder now. Save it for the enemy, Ruiz muttered. He pretended not to see Ellis's shame. Then his earpiece crackled. Jenna's voice, low and tight. 3 hostiles northeast rooftops. Bearing 047. They've got NVGs. Mark M, Graves replied. A faint red dot danced across Ruiz's goggles, painting the edge of a crumbling roof. On your go, Jenna whispered. Send it, Graves said. Jenna's rifle spoke. A half-second later, so did the night. 3 figures collapsing like strings cut from puppets. Targets down, she said. Clean, Graves confirmed. Push forward. They reached the minaret at the village's center. Its base was hollowed by shelling, debris piled high. Graves and Diaz emerged from the western street, faces set like stone. Nothing on our end, Graves said. Ruiz stepped into the rubble. His boot caught on something soft. He froze, heart stuttering. Slowly he looked down. It was a hand. Miller's. Or what was left of it. The flesh was gray, fingers stiff, the wrist ending in ragged meat. Ellis gagged. Diaz swore under his breath. Get it together, Graves said flatly. He crouched, picking up a scrap of cloth tangled in the rubble, Miller's name patch, soaked dark. They took him, Ruiz said quietly. They didn't kill him. Not here. Then where? Diaz asked. As if in answer, gunfire erupted from the hills. Bullets shredded the ground around them. Dust and rock spat into the air. Ambush. Graves roared. They dove for cover, returning fire blindly. Ruiz's rifle kicked against his shoulder, muzzle flash carving brief stars in the dark. Sniper's ridge line. Jenna called. Her shots cracked back in counterpoint. One enemy shape tumbled, then another. Ellis lay suppressing fire. Graves ordered. Ellis scrambled behind a broken wall, spraying rounds toward the ridge. His screams were louder than his gun. Diaz, flank left with me. Ruiz, hold center. They moved like desperate animals, instinct more than thought. Ruiz fired until his rifle clicked dry, slammed in a new mag, fired again. He could see the enemy now, black shapes darting between rocks, muzzle flashes winking like fireflies. A grenade arced overhead. Down? Ruiz shouted. The blast slammed him into the wall. His ears rang. Dust blinded him. When it cleared, Ellis was screaming, clutching his leg where blood pumped bright. I've got you. Ruiz yelled. He crawled, dragging Ellis behind cover as bullets stitched the wall. He tore open a field dressing, wrapping it tight above the wound. "Stay with me, kid," he said. Ellis's face was pale as wax. Jenna's voice cut through the chaos, cold and precise. "Last target, down." Silence fell again, ragged and broken. Graves appeared, panting, dust-caked. "Everyone alive?" "Ellis is hit," Ruiz said. "Diaz, patch him for evac," Graves ordered. He glanced at the dismembered hand, the name patch. His jaw tightened. "They baited us." "They've got Miller," Ruiz said. Graves met his eyes. "Then we take him back." They withdrew under Jenna's overwatch, carrying Ellis between them. The boy groaned, slipping in and out of consciousness. The village receded into blackness, silent as a tomb. Hours later, back at Forward Operating Base Falcon, the medics rushed Ellis away. The rest of the team collapsed on benches in the dim-lit command tent. Graves stood before the map table, hands braced on its edge. "Intel confirms Miller's beacon pinged 30 clicks northeast, deep in insurgent territory. High-value area. Multiple fortified positions." "That's suicide," Diaz muttered. "That's our job," Graves shot back. Jenna leaned against the wall, sipping bitter coffee like it was wine. "They'll expect us to hit loud and hard. So we don't. We ghost in." Graves studied her, then nodded. "Agreed. No air support, no drones. Just us." Ruiz stared at the map's blank expanse of jagged hills and red X's. Every choice here would be blood. But he thought of Miller laughing over bad coffee, of his stupid card tricks, of the promise they'd all made to never leave anyone behind. "I'm in," Ruiz said. "Same," Diaz grunted. Jenna's lips curved, sharp as a blade. "Always." Graves looked at them, eyes grim. "We leave at 0200. Rest while you can." The team dispersed. Ruiz lingered, staring at the map's darkness. He felt the weight of it settle on his spine like a stone. Later, in the barracks, he sat on his bunk cleaning his rifle by muscle memory. Jenna sat across from him, working silently on her scope. The dim light painted her face in copper shadows. "You good?" she asked suddenly. Ruiz glanced up. "Fine." "Liar." He almost smiled. "You?" She considered. "I don't think about it. I just do the thing in front of me. One shot, one breath. Then the next." Ruiz nodded slowly. "Wish I could do that." "Don't," she said. "It makes you cold." They sat in silence after that, rifles whispering under their hands. At 0200, Fireteam Raven geared up and stepped into the cold night. The moon was a thin blade above them. As the base faded behind them, Ruiz thought about how the world could change in a heartbeat, how laughter could become silence, how a friend could become a mission, and how somewhere out there, Staff Sergeant Miller was waiting in the dark, alone. Ruiz gripped his rifle tighter. This time they wouldn't fail. The helicopter thundered low over the drenched canopy, engines whining under the weight of soaked gear, wounded bodies, and unspoken fear. Elena Marquez sat hunched against the bulkhead, mud crusting her skin like a second hide. Her rifle lay across her lap, empty, barrel still warm from the last desperate fusillade. The cabin stank of cordite, blood, and engine oil. Sergeant Kane sat opposite, shoulders sagging, boots planted wide as if bracing against an invisible tide. His hands were still clamped around Corporal Diaz's limp wrist, feeling for a pulse he wasn't sure he wanted to confirm. The medics worked fast, barely speaking, gauze, tourniquets for lines, while the helicopter juddered through turbulence. Diaz's skin had gone waxy, his chest fluttering shallowly. Kane glanced at Marquez. Their eyes locked through the roar. He nodded once, as if conceding something he'd resisted all along. "You bought us this shot," he shouted over the engine. Marquez didn't answer. She just turned her gaze back to the receding jungle, rain streaking down the window like melted glass. They landed at Forward Operating Base Keating just before dawn, the eastern sky smudged with bruised light. The base squatted in a mountain valley like a steel insect, all blast walls, concertina wire, and mud-slicked helipads. The medics rushed Diaz off on a stretcher the instant the skids touched ground. Kane followed, limping slightly, leaving bloody boot prints on the tarmac. Marquez climbed down last, stiff, shoulders screaming from tension. As her boots hit the concrete, the smell of diesel and wet sandbags washed over her. Before she could take a breath, a voice barked, "Private Marquez." "With me." Colonel Briggs stood at the edge of the pad, rain beating off his poncho, jaw clenched like granite. Marquez straightened, saluted, and followed. Briggs' office was little more than a prefab hut lined with maps, radios, and the constant whine of generators. He closed the door behind her, muting the base's noise to a dull hum. "You held the ridge," he said without preamble. "Yes, sir." "Casualties?" "5 Kia. 1 critical, DS. Everyone else, walking wounded." Briggs grunted. "Sit." She did, awkward in her mud-streaked armor. He leaned over the table, eyes boring into her. "Intel says that wasn't just a random insurgent push. That was a probing strike by the Crimson Dawn. Heard of them?" She nodded. Everyone had. The Crimson Dawn were less an army than a shadow, ex-special forces gone rogue, mercenaries, black market zealots, ghosts who left mass graves and propaganda videos in their wake. "They've been operating in this sector for months," Briggs continued. "Until now we couldn't pin them. Your little ridge fight changed that. They showed their hand. And they don't do that unless they think they can win." Marquez stayed silent. Briggs slid a folder across the table. Inside were satellite photos, a cluster of prefab huts deep in the jungle, camouflaged under netting. Dozens of figures moved between them. A radio tower poked above the canopy like a crooked finger. "This," Briggs said, tapping it, "is our shot. We hit this camp hard and fast, and we cut the head off their local network before it grows." He fixed her with a stare. "I want you on the strike team." Marquez blinked. "Sir, I'm just a—" "You're the only reason Bravo's not rotting in a tree line. You've got instincts I trust, and I don't say that lightly." She swallowed. "Who else?" "Special Activities Group is sending a detachment. You'll be embedded. Their CO is Captain Rhys Vance, he'll brief you." Marquez hesitated. Her body ached for sleep, for oblivion, but something coiled tight in her chest at the thought of slipping back into the mud, of stalking through the green silence with her finger on the trigger. "When do we leave?" she asked. Briggs smiled faintly. "Wheels up in 4 hours." She spent 2 of those hours in the shower, sitting on the tile as hot water scalded the mud off her skin. She didn't remember standing up, just being back in her quarters, shoving fresh magazines into her vest with shaking hands. Kane found her there. "You're going back out," he said. "Not a question." She nodded. "Briggs pulled strings, huh?" "He thinks this could stop them." Kane leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. His face was clean now, but exhaustion carved deep shadows under his eyes. "Diaz is still alive," he said quietly. "Barely. They're flying him to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center." Marquez paused. "He'll make it." Kane nodded, as if saying it aloud anchored it in reality. Then he gave her a crooked smile. "Don't get yourself killed. I'll be pissed if I have to break in another rookie." She snorted. "I'm not a rookie. After this, no one will argue." The team met on the flight line at dawn. 8 figures in matte black gear, faces obscured by paint and night vision goggles. Their rifles were sleek, custom, nothing like the battered M4 slung across Marquez's chest. Captain Rhys Vance stood at their head, tall, lean, a predator's grace in every movement. His voice was low, controlled when he spoke. "Crimson Dawn Outpost. Estimated 30 tangos, mix of small arms and RPGs. Intel confirms a central comms hub, they coordinate local cells from there. We hit fast, burn everything and vanish." He glanced at her. "You're our point. You get us eyes on that hub." Marquez nodded once. Vance's gaze lingered a second longer than necessary, as if measuring something in her. Then he turned away. "Mount up." The flight was silent except for rotor thrum. The jungle stretched below like a living sea, unbroken green fading into mist. Marquez sat near the door, checking her gear in methodical order. Rifle, sidearm, extra mags, knife, camo netting, radio beacons. Her hands were steady now. Vance crouched beside her as the helicopter banked low. "You spooked them back there," he said quietly. She blinked at him. "That ridge fight," he continued. "They don't spook easy. That means you're dangerous. Keep being dangerous." She almost smiled. "Yes, sir." They inserted 5 clicks from the target, rappelling into mud that sucked at their boots. The air was thick as syrup, buzzing with unseen insects. Marquez took point, moving low, every step deliberate. The others followed in a loose, staggered line, ghosts among the trees. After an hour the air changed, warmer, electric. She smelled smoke. She froze, raised a fist. The line halted instantly. Through her scope she saw the camp. Prefab huts crouched under camo netting, a ring of sandbags and makeshift watchtowers. Men with rifles patrolled lazily, unaware. At the center rose the radio tower, guy wires taut, blinking faint red. Vance crouched beside her. "We ghost the sentries, plant charges on the tower, then light it all up. Clean, quiet, done." Marquez stared at the tower, unease prickling her skin. Something felt off. Too few guards. Too exposed. "This is wrong," she whispered. Vance frowned. "Explain." "They want us to see this. They left it sloppy." He hesitated, scanning the camp through his NVGs. His jaw tightened. Trap. Before she could answer, the jungle erupted. Gunfire hammered from the flanks, dozens of muzzle flashes strobing through the trees. Bullets chewed into trunks, spraying splinters. Claymore mines hidden in the undergrowth detonated, shockwaves slamming them flat. "Ambush. Scatter." Vance roared. Marquez dove behind a log as rounds hissed overhead. Branches snapped, leaves shredded. One of Vance's men screamed as he spun away, armor smoking from shrapnel. She clawed her way through the mud, heart hammering. Shapes moved in the trees, dozens, maybe more, encircling. Vance slid in beside her, teeth bared. They knew. They knew we were coming. She bit back panic. We punched through west toward the river. "Break contact." He nodded once, decisive. "On your mark." She tossed a smoke grenade, the canister hissing, billowing thick white clouds. The jungle dissolved into fog. "Move," she shouted. They surged as one, firing blind to suppress. Shadows lunged out of the smoke. She cut one down, sidestepped another, bayonet him through the chest. Bullets snapped past her ears. Someone went down behind her with a choked cry, boots thrashing. The river glimmered ahead, silver through the mist. Salvation. Then a machine gun opened up from the ridge above, a scything roar. Dirt geysered around them. One of Vance's men spun and crumpled, helmet shattering. Marquez skidded into cover, brain racing. The gun was the linchpin. Take it out or none of them left the jungle. "I'll flank," she gasped. Vance grabbed her arm. "You won't make it. Watch me." She ripped free and bolted into the trees. She circled wide, lungs burning, using every scrap of undergrowth for cover. The machine gun chattered relentlessly, pinning the team down. Her boots slipped on a mossy rock. She caught herself, belly flopped into ferns, froze. There. 50 meters upslope, perched in a hollow, 3 gunners behind a sandbag nest, barrels spitting flame. She unspooled her camo netting, draping it over herself, belly crawled the last meters inch by inch, mud sucking at her elbows. Her heart was a war drum. She braced her rifle on a root, exhaled and fired. The first gunner jerked, blood spraying. The second spun toward her, she double-tapped him through the chest. The third lunged for the trigger, she shot him through the throat. Silence slammed down like a hammer. She didn't breathe until she was sure they were still. Then she surged forward, kicked the machine gun off its mount, and lobbed a grenade into the nest. The blast rolled through the jungle like thunder. She sprinted downslope as the team broke contact, surging for the river. Vance was last out, dragging a wounded man. His goggles were gone, face streaked with blood and rain, eyes blazing. "Guns down," Marquez gasped. "Good," he snarled. "Then we live." They plunged into the river, bullets snapping overhead, and let the current drag them into the green dark. Hours later, soaked, bleeding, and half delirious, they hauled themselves onto a muddy bank miles downstream. No one spoke for a long time. The jungle buzzed faintly around them, like it hadn't just tried to kill them. Vance sat heavily on a log, breathing like he'd run through hell. Marquez collapsed in the mud, staring up through the canopy at a scrap of gray dawn sky. Her body trembled with exhaustion and adrenaline afterburn. Vance finally looked at her, expression unreadable. "They knew we were coming," he said. She nodded. "That means someone on our side told them." The words hung like a blade between them. Marquez felt something cold slide into her gut. A traitor. By the time they staggered back into forward operating base Keating that evening, half their team was dead or wounded, the mission a smoking ruin. The Crimson Dawn camp had been empty when drones finally checked it. Colonel Briggs met them on the pad, his face carved from stone. Vance spat in the mud at his feet. "We were set up." Briggs said nothing. His jaw flexed once. Marquez stood in the rain, watching their blood swirl down the drainage grates, and thought of the radio tower blinking red like an eye, waiting for them. And in that moment she knew, this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Under the dim haze of dawn, the forward operating base was a tense knot of motion and murmured voices. Sergeant Cole stood at the edge of the command tent, his eyes darting over a digital map smeared with blinking red icons. Across from him, Captain Reyes was stabbing a finger at a cluster of coordinates where enemy drones had last been detected. "They're shifting the kill zone," Reyes said. "We don't move fast, they'll box us in before sundown." Beside Cole, Avery crouched silently, cleaning the long barrel of her sniper rifle with deliberate, slow strokes. Her camouflage hood was still streaked with dried mud from the previous night's crawl. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her eyes were fixed, dark and sharp, yet under them bruised circles hinted at how thin she'd been stretched. The others gave her space, not out of respect exactly but something closer to superstition. In just weeks she'd become the quiet ghost of their platoon, appearing on ridges or in ruins with impossible timing, her shots shifting the flow of battle like sudden fate. Cole crouched near her. "We might need you on Overwatch again," he said quietly. "High ridge to the east. Long sight line. You'll be alone." She gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, and kept cleaning the rifle. They deployed 30 minutes later in a convoy of 3 armored MRAPs. The air was sharp with the scent of dust and motor oil. Every man and woman was wound tight, heads on swivels, fingers brushing triggers. Kunar Province was alive in that haunted way it always was, valleys too still, too silent, broken only by sudden birds scattering like shrapnel. Halfway through the mountain pass, the lead vehicle jolted to a sudden stop. "IED wire," the driver said over comms, voice clipped. The team piled out, forming a perimeter as the bomb tech worked, hands steady despite the sweat streaking his goggles. Avery climbed out last, scanning the cliffs above. The wind tugged her hood as she settled behind a rock, rifle laid flat. She slowed her breathing. The world seemed to contract around the scope's tunnel. Dust spiraled lazily on the distant ridge. Then she saw it. A glint, metal fleeting between rocks. She tapped her mic twice. "Contact. Ridge north." Her voice was flat, clinical. Cole spun. "Copy. Suppression?" "Negative," she replied. "One shot." She exhaled and squeezed. The shot cracked like breaking glass. The glint disappeared. A beat later, a distant figure tumbled from the ridge, arms flailing. Then everything erupted. Bullets chewed into the dirt around them, sparking off armored hulls. The ambush had been waiting for her shot, their signal to open fire. The team dove for cover as machine gun fire roared from 3 directions. "Cover left flank." Reyes shouted. "Move. Move." Avery was already relocating low and fast. She slid behind another outcrop, reloading as dust and fragments rained over her. She saw 2 muzzle flashes bloom from a broken wall halfway up the slope. Her reticle found the first. Crack. Down. The second shifted, firing wildly toward their tech. She flicked, fired again. Silence. But then a mortar round slammed into the road. The world went white. Her ears rang. Heat clawed her skin. She blinked hard and saw Cole dragging the bleeding bomb tech toward cover, shouting words she couldn't hear. Her hands moved on their own, racking another round, swinging the scope toward the mortar team now setting up for a second shot. They were farther, 600 meters, but clear. She let her breathing fall away, finger floating on the trigger. Crack. The mortar man folded sideways. Another tried to grab the tube. Crack. The tube toppled as he crumpled. The barrage died in their throats. The ringing faded, replaced by screams and radio chatter. Their medic was already working on the bomb tech, hands crimson. Reyes was calling in air support, voice slicing through the chaos. Cole knelt beside Avery, panting. "We've got to move. They'll try to box us in." She nodded once. The smell of burned rubber and blood clung to the air as they hauled their wounded back into the vehicles. The convoy tore forward, engines howling just as 2 enemy trucks crested the ridge behind them, guns blazing. Bullets spanged off their hulls like angry hornets. One of the gunners in back was hit, blood misting the wind. Reyes grabbed the gun and returned fire, shouting wordless fury. The trucks peeled away only when 2 friendly attack helicopters streaked overhead, missiles screaming. They didn't stop until they reached an abandoned NATO supply depot 30 miles deeper into the mountains. They barricaded themselves inside, patching wounds, gulping water, checking ammo. The depot smelled of rust and old diesel, its walls pocked from past firefights. It felt like a grave someone forgot to finish. Night came swift and black. No stars. Just the low hum of distant drones, like insects gnawing at the sky. Cole gathered them around a battered table lit by 1 red lamp. "Enemy force strength, unknown," he said. "But they're adapting fast. They knew our route. Means they're listening." Reyes rubbed his eyes. "We've got a mole? Or leaks from higher up," Cole said. "Either way they'll come here. Soon." Everyone looked at Avery then, as if drawn by gravity. She stayed in the shadows, cross-legged, rifle across her lap like some strange extension of her body. Her voice came quiet. "Let them come. Cole stared at her, searching. We'll make them pay. But only if we're smarter than them. That night no one slept much. Avery didn't even try. She sat on the roof, wrapped in her camo cloak, scope sweeping the hills like a lighthouse beam. Hours passed. Wind hissed through broken windows. A rat skittered across the concrete below. Then, movement. Far ridge. 3 figures, barely more than smudges in the darkness, gliding low. Recon scouts. She whispered coordinates into her radio. Reyes crept up beside her with binoculars. You sure? Positive. Take them. She did. 3 muffled cracks spaced like a heartbeat. 3 bodies crumpled soundlessly. The wind carried away the sound. By dawn, enemy reinforcements had surrounded the depot. They came with trucks, technicals, and mortars, flooding into the valley like an iron tide. The team scrambled into positions, adrenaline burning away fatigue. Cole set claymores along the entrance while Reyes coordinated air support that was still 40 minutes out. Too long. They would have to hold. The first wave hit with screaming engines and roaring guns. The depot wall shook under the barrage. Dust choked the air. Concrete splintered. Grenades clattered across the floor. The team answered with disciplined, furious fire, cutting down attackers as they surged through the broken gates. But for every one that fell, 2 more seemed to crawl over their bodies. Avery became a phantom. She moved along the roofline like smoke, her rifle singing death into the chaos. Every shot counted. 1 gunner on a truck, gone. 1 RPG man lining up the wall, gone. She didn't feel fear. Just focus, razor-sharp, absolute. Around her, the others were screaming, fighting, bleeding. She barely noticed. Then she did notice. Cole, pinned behind a crumbling wall, out of ammo as 2 enemies closed on him with knives. Something hot tore through her chest. Not a bullet but something older, primal. She sprinted, sliding down the shattered roof, drawing her sidearm midair. She hit the ground hard, rolled, came up firing. 2 rounds, center mass, both attackers dropping inches from Cole's boots. He stared at her, breathless. Thanks. She reloaded in silence, smoke curling off her pistol, and melted back into the fight. Minutes blurred. The depot floor became a hellscape of blood, brass, and screams. Reyes took a round through the shoulder and kept fighting. The medic died when a grenade blew out the side wall. The bomb tech, still bandaged, crawled to the front door with a satchel of C4 and blew the first enemy truck sky high, laughing as shrapnel shredded him. Then the air support finally arrived. 2 Apache gunships screaming low, spitting missiles and chain gun fire. The valley erupted in firestorms. The survivors fled, shrieking. Silence slammed down as sudden as the gunfire had risen. Smoke curled from blackened vehicles. The smell was unbearable. The depot stood, somehow, though half its walls were gone. They staggered among the wreckage, half deaf, half blind. Cole slumped against a wall, blood soaking his side. We lived, he said, incredulous. Barely, Reyes muttered. Avery stood apart, staring at the burning horizon. She felt nothing. No triumph. Just the faint tremor in her hands she couldn't stop. Her camouflage cloak was soaked red and black, indistinguishable from the charred ruin around her. They'd survived because of her shots. And because others had died. She turned and walked into the shattered depot's shadows, saying nothing. That night, as the wounded slept and the dead lay in rows under torn tarps, she sat on the roof again, eyes fixed on the black ridges beyond. Somewhere out there more were coming. She could feel them. The war wasn't done with her. It never would be. And for the first time, a single thought crept in and stayed. Maybe she didn't want it to be. The sky above Kunar province was the color of bruised steel when Avery woke, cold sweat drying on her skin. The burned-out husk of the old depot loomed around her like the skeleton of some ancient beast. It was silent except for the creak of settling metal and the distant call of carrion birds circling the battlefield below. She sat up slowly, shoulders aching from the night's stillness, eyes sweeping the horizon automatically. No movement. No heat signatures. No glints of glass. But it felt wrong, too quiet. Like the valley was holding its breath. Below, Sergeant Cole was bent over a map with Captain Reyes, their faces drawn and hollow. They were both still wrapped in bloody bandages, neither willing to rest. Every survivor of their unit who could still walk was moving with the mechanical slowness of shock, sweeping rubble, dragging corpses into lines, or just staring blankly into the ruins. The depot was no longer a stronghold. It was a graveyard. Avery climbed down from the roof, boots crunching over spent brass. Cole looked up. You get any sleep? She shook her head. Didn't think so, he said. He sounded almost like he was trying to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. We've got maybe 6 hours before they try again. Reyes jabbed at the map. Intel drone pinged something. Convoy of 8 technicals for troop trucks, maybe 60 fighters. Moving fast. They'll be here by nightfall. Cole grunted. And we've got 14 combat effectives. 15 if you count our ghost here. Avery said nothing. She just pulled her rifle strap over her shoulder and began checking her magazines. She'd burned through almost everything in the last fight. Each magazine now felt like a shard of her own life. Reyes exhaled, rubbing at the stubble on his jaw. We can't hold this place. It's a death trap. No cover, no resupply, no medevac. If they encircle again, it's over. Cole straightened, jaw tight. Then we don't let them encircle. We go on the offensive. The room went quiet. Even the distant wind seemed to pause. Reyes blinked. You're suggesting we attack a force 4 times our size with half our people barely standing? Cole leaned over the map. We hit them before they're ready. Ambush the convoy in the gorge here. He tapped a serpentine stretch of road clinging to a cliff face, where they've got nowhere to maneuver. Plant charges on the cliff walls. Bring it down on them. And if it doesn't work? Cole's eyes flicked toward Avery. Then we make sure it works. Avery met his gaze, unblinking. There was no defiance in her eyes, no bravado. Just the cold acceptance of someone who had already died 100 times in her mind. They began to prepare. Hours passed like heartbeats. The sun crawled higher, bleaching the mountains to bone. The survivors moved with a quiet urgency, gathering their remaining claymores, satchels of C4, det cord, and what little ammunition they still had. They stripped the depot down to its bones, doors for makeshift stretchers, wiring for trip lines, even fuel from broken generators. They were turning ghosts into teeth. By noon they were on the move, weaving through narrow goat paths toward the gorge. The terrain was cruel, jagged, and steep, the kind of place where one wrong step meant a 1,000-foot fall. The thin air bit at their lungs. Still no one complained. Not even the wounded. Especially not the wounded. They all understood. If this didn't work, none of them were leaving these mountains alive. The gorge was a scar carved deep into the earth, its walls sheer and crumbling, its road clinging like a thread along the cliff. Perfect for an ambush, and perfect for a slaughter if it failed. They got to work in silence. Cole led a team to set charges along the upper ledges. Reyes positioned gun teams at either end of the kill zone. Avery climbed higher than any of them, scaling the broken rock until she perched like a shadow 200 feet above the road, rifle resting on a flat stone, her cloak blending into the cliff face. From up there she could see everything, the winding road, the cliffs, the skeletal forest beyond. She felt like she could see the whole war. They finished just as the light began to fail, smearing the gorge in orange and black. The radio crackled. A drone feed from command, grainy and stuttering. The convoy was coming. 10 minutes out. Dust trails clawed at the horizon. Cole's voice came low in her earpiece. Hold. Wait until they're all in the kill zone. Not before. Avery said nothing. Her finger floated over the trigger, heart slow, steady. The wind whispered past her hood. She felt oddly calm, as if the whole world had narrowed to a single corridor of inevitability. Then they came. 8 technicals first, mounted with machine guns, engines growling. Behind them, 4 trucks packed with fighters, their rifles jutting like quills. The road shuddered under their weight. The canyon walls threw back the sound until it felt like the earth was growling. They came fast, arrogant, unaware. The lead technical rolled right past the first trip line. Wait, Cole breathed. Wait. The last truck cleared the mouth of the gorge. Now. The world exploded. Charges buried in the cliff face ripped open with deafening roars. Whole slabs of rock sheared away, crashing down in avalanches that crushed trucks like tin cans. The lead technical swerved, skidded sideways and flipped, slamming into the wall. Fire blossomed. Men screamed. Dust swallowed everything. Then the team opened fire. Reyes' gun crews raked the convoy from both ends, bullets sparking and shrieking in the choking dust. Fighters scrambled from the wreckage only to be cut down. The survivors tried to turn their guns upslope, but Cole's team hit them from behind with grenades and C4, shredding the trapped column. The canyon became a furnace of sound and chaos. From above, Avery was not human. She was something else, something cold and ancient and exact. Her rifle barked in measured beats, each shot plucking a life from the melee below. Gunners, officers, radio men, gone in the blink of her scope. She shifted position constantly, flowing along the cliff like wind, always one step ahead of any return fire. Bullets chewed the rock where she'd been seconds before. Dust coated her teeth. Her hands didn't shake. It was working. It was actually working. Until it didn't. A deep, metallic growl rose from beyond the smoke, a sound none of them expected. The dust parted, and a hulking shape lumbered into view behind the ruined convoy, an armored infantry fighting vehicle, treads grinding the shattered road, cannons swinging toward their position. It fired. The shell slammed into the right cliff face, vaporizing a whole gun team in a cloud of fire and stone. Screams tore through the comms. Armor. Armor in the kill zone. Reyes bellowed. We don't have anything that can punch it. Cole's voice cut through raw. Avery. To. Engine intake left side just above the tread. She swung her scope. The IFV was grinding forward through the burning wreckage, cannon spitting, its hull shedding sparks from small arms fire like rain on steel. The intake was tiny, half hidden by plating, barely the width of her palm, and 400 meters away through dust and chaos. She breathed. The world fell away. Her finger moved like a whisper. Crack. The shot punched through the intake. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the vehicle shuddered, belched flame from its side vents and erupted. The explosion rolled down the canyon, shaking the ground. The wreck spun sideways, toppled and went silent, burning from the inside out. The survivors broke. What few fighters remained threw down their weapons and ran into the desert beyond. Silence crashed down like a wave. The gorge was a charnel house of twisted metal and fire. The air burned to breathe. Bits of rock still clattered down from the cliffs. No one spoke. No one moved. Then slowly, unbelievably, laughter crackled over the comms. Cole's ragged and stunned. We did it, he said. Holy hell. We actually did it. Cheers rose, thin and disbelieving. Reyes hooped, voice breaking. Get down here, Avery. You saved all our asses. She didn't move. She just lay there a moment longer, cheek pressed to the cooling stone, staring at the black smoke curling into the red sky. Her hands were trembling so hard she had to set the rifle down. When she finally climbed down, the others stared at her like she wasn't quite real. Blood streaked her cloak, her hood half torn, eyes wide and hollow. Reyes clapped her shoulder hard enough to jolt her. I'm buying you a whole damn bar when we get back to base. She managed the faintest smile. It felt like it didn't belong to her. They limped back toward the depot as night rose over the mountains. The air was cold and clean now, washed by the fires. The survivors moved slow, exhausted beyond words, but lighter somehow. They had beaten the impossible. Lived through it. For now. Later, when the stars came out sharp and endless, Avery sat alone on the shattered rooftop of the depot again, legs drawn to her chest. Below, the wounded slept in rows, the living murmuring in their dreams. She looked at her hands in the starlight. They were steady now. Too steady. Cole climbed up quietly, settling beside her with a groan. He smelled of smoke and dried blood. Hell of a thing you did today, he said. She didn't look at him. We all did. Yeah. He was quiet a long time. Then, they'll make you a legend for this. She shook her head. Legends die. I'm still here. He studied her profile, the way the starlight carved her face from shadow. For how long? She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the dark mountains. Somewhere out there, more convoys were forming, more guns being loaded, more eyes watching through distant scopes. She could almost feel them, like thunder you knew was coming before you heard it. She thought of the child they had all once mocked, the scrawny girl with the mud-smeared cloak they hadn't wanted in their unit. The girl they had laughed at, until her bullets had started changing the war. Now they didn't laugh. Now they looked at her like she was something else entirely. And as the cold wind swept over the ruins, Avery realized the strangest part of all. A part of her didn't want to stop. Because out here, in the endless silence between shots, she finally felt like she belonged. The end.